There is a chair sitting in the grass behind an old house, and no one alive can quite remember who carried it out there. It faces west, toward the place where the sun goes down behind the fence line, and the wood has gone soft and gray from years of dew. Once, that chair was pulled out every single evening. Not for a party, not for anything. Just to sit, once the plates were cleared and the light started to lean gold across the yard. By the time this ends, you will understand exactly what that chair was for, and why the people who kept sitting in one long after everybody else went inside tended to live longer, sleep deeper, and carry a kind of calm the rest of us have been chasing with everything except the one thing that actually worked. Because there was a time not that long ago when the evening belonged to the outside, when supper ended and the whole family drifted out through the screen door into the last hour of daylight and stayed there until the stars came. No one planned it. No one called it anything. It was simply where the day ended, on the porch, on the back step, in the grass with your shoes off, in the garden pulling one more weed while the light held. And then, almost overnight, it stopped. A blue glow appeared in the front window of one house, then another, then every house on the street. And the evening moved indoors. The chairs stayed out in the grass, but nobody sat in them anymore. The porches emptied. The gardens went quiet after dinner. And a whole way of ending the day, one that human beings had kept for thousands of years, disappeared so gently that no one stood up and announced it was gone. Here is the strange part. Nobody chose it. There was no moment where a family sat down and decided the evening outside was over. It just slid away, one comfortable night at a time, traded for something warmer, brighter, easier. And what we gave up did not feel like much on any single night. That is exactly why it was so easy to lose. But think about what actually happened in that hour outside. The whole family in one place doing almost nothing, with nowhere to look but at each other and at the sky. The slow talk that only comes when hands are idle and the light is dim. The neighbor leaning on the fence. The children catching the last of the day in the grass while the adults let their shoulders drop for the first time since morning. That hour was doing something to all of them. Something we are only now, decades later, starting to measure. And there is a question I want you to hold on to, because we will not answer it until much later. In every family, on every street, there was usually one person who kept going out to sit even after the television arrived. One grandmother, one old neighbor, who still carried the chair to the same spot every evening while everyone else stayed in front of the screen. People thought it was just habit, an old way that would die with them. But those were often the people who stayed sharp the longest, who outlived the ones who stopped. Keep them in mind. We will come back to why. Because this is not really a story about television. Television is just the thing that happened to arrive at the exact moment we stopped going outside. It is a story about an hour, a specific, ordinary, sacred hour that used to sit at the end of every day like a door closing softly, and what happened to us on the inside when we let that door swing shut and never opened it again. You have probably felt the absence of it without ever having a name for it. That restless feeling around dusk, when the day is done but nothing feels finished. That is the ghost of the evening we lost. So let me take you back to the moment it started to disappear. To the first blue light in the first front window, and the small, quiet surrender that nobody at the time even noticed they were making. Picture a street in the early evening, sometime in the middle of the last century. The supper smell still hanging in the air, and in one window near the corner, a strange new light, not the warm yellow of a lamp, a cold, flickering blue that shifted and jumped against the glass. The neighbors noticed it first from the outside, walking home, a blue window in a row of yellow ones, and they were curious the way anyone is curious. So they knocked, and they were invited in. And they sat, 10 or 12 people crowded into a small front room, watching a little gray screen the size of a book, and for the first time in the history of that street, the evening happened indoors. That was the beginning, not a decision, an invitation. You did not turn off the evening outside. You simply got asked in, and it was cold that night, or it was going to rain, or the show was starting, and you went. And it was wonderful. That is the thing nobody says. It was genuinely, honestly wonderful. The whole world arriving in your front room. Faces and places you would never see otherwise. Laughter on command. You would have gone in too. But watch what the light did slowly over the following years. At first the set went on after the evening outside late, once it was fully dark. Then it crept earlier. Then it went on the moment the plates were cleared and the family carried their plates to the front room instead of the porch. Then the porch furniture started to look strange, unused, a little embarrassing, like a thing from an older and simpler time. And within a single generation, the chair in the grass became a chair nobody could explain. Here is a number worth sitting with. In the span of roughly 15 years, the share of homes with a television went from almost none to nearly all. 15 years. That is faster than almost any change in the way people lived, faster than the car, faster than the telephone. An entire species that had ended its days outdoors, around fire and under sky, for as long as there had been a species at all, moved indoors and sat down facing one direction in less time than it takes a child to grow up. And nothing about it felt like a loss because every single night the choice was reasonable. Stay out in the cooling dark, swatting insects, running out of things to say. Or go in where it is warm and bright and something interesting is always happening. Who would not go in? You would, I would, we did. But think about what quietly changed about the shape of an evening. Outside, everyone had faced each other, or faced the same open view, the garden, the street, the fading sky. The talk moved in every direction because there was nothing pulling the eyes to one place. Inside, everyone turned and faced the same corner. The bodies were in the same room, closer than ever, but the attention all flowed one way, into the screen, and none of it flowed between the people anymore. That is the trade nobody saw, not company for loneliness. That would have been obvious, and we would have refused it. The trade was subtler and far more clever than that. It was company that faced outward for company that faced a wall. It was a room full of people looking at each other for a room full of people looking at the same bright point and no longer at each other at all. And the strangest thing is how good it felt to lose it. Comfort is the quietest thief there is. It never breaks in. You open the door and invite it to stay, and it stays, and it slowly rearranges the furniture of your whole life while you thank it for coming. So the porch is emptied. The gardens went dark after dinner, and a light that we had welcomed as a guest became the thing that decided every evening where the family would be and which way they would look. But to understand what we actually lost, you have to understand what that hour outside really was, because it was never just sitting. Something specific happened out there every night, and it is worth describing exactly before we forget it entirely. So let me describe it, that hour, the way it actually went, before it fades past the point where anyone can still remember the details. Supper ends. The light outside has gone from white to gold. Someone pushes back a chair and says nothing in particular, just stands and drifts toward the door. And one by one the others follow, not because they were called, but because the house has grown too small and warm for the fullness after a meal, and the outside is exactly the right size for it. The screen door bangs, that specific sound, wood and spring and a slap of the frame, a sound that meant the day was turning. And then the settling. An old man lowers himself into the chair in the grass with a long breath. A younger one leans against the porch post. Someone sits right down on the step, elbows on knees. The children are already gone, into the far corner of the yard where the light lasts longest. And then mostly nothing. This is the part that is almost impossible to explain to anyone who did not live it. Nothing happened. No one performed. No one entertained. There was no plan for the hour and no product at the end of it. People sat and looked at the yard and let the food settle and watched the light change by tiny degrees. And every so often somebody said something, and every so often somebody answered, and long silences opened up between the words and nobody rushed to fill them. We have almost no experience of that now. Think about the last time you sat with other people and let a silence last 2 full minutes without anyone reaching for a phone or a remote or a reason to get up. It feels almost unbearable to us now. Back then, it was the texture of every single evening. The silence was not empty. It was full. It was the sound of people who did not need to be doing anything to be together. And the senses came alive in a way a screen never allows. The temperature dropping degree by degree on the skin of your arms. The smell of the grass releasing the day's heat. The particular blue that the air turns just after the sun is gone but before the dark. A color that has no name and lasts about 20 minutes and that most people alive today have never once stopped to watch. The first bat. The first star. the sound of a dog 3 yards over, and a screen door somewhere else banging, meaning another family on another step was doing the exact same thing. Because that is the part we forget. It was not one family alone. The whole street was outside at once. The whole town, the whole country more or less at the same hour, all facing their own patch of fading sky. You were sitting in your own yard, but you were part of something enormous and invisible, a nation of people all ending the day the same slow way, and you could hear it happening all around you in the dark. Here is the paradox at the center of it. That hour looked like the most unproductive time imaginable. Nothing was made, nothing was achieved. By every measure we now use for a well-spent evening, it was a total waste. And yet the people who lived that way, night after night, year after year, were building something we have spent fortunes trying to buy back. Steadiness, belonging, a nervous system that knew how to come down at the end of a day. A body that knew, without being told, that the work was over and it was safe now to rest. We replace that hour with something that looks like rest but is not. You know the difference. You have sat in front of a screen for 3 hours and stood up more tired than when you sat down. That is not rest. That is stimulation wearing rest's clothes. And notice what the old evening asked of you, which was almost nothing, and yet turned out to be everything. It asked you to be bored for a little while, to sit in a stretch of time that had no content in it, no story being told to you, no bright thing to chase, just the slow drain of the light and the people around you and your own thoughts finally allowed to surface. We treat boredom now like a small emergency, something to be solved in the 2 seconds it takes to reach for a phone. But that soft, unfilled boredom was where the mind sorted itself out at the end of a day. It was where worries rose up and got looked at and set down. We did not just lose the evening. We lost the last regular hour in which a person did nothing on purpose, and we have been quietly restless ever since. But the deepest thing that hour did was not about the body at all. It was about what people said to each other out there in the dark. Because there were words that only ever came after the sun went down, and never in the daylight, and never in front of a screen. And those words held the whole family together in a way we are only now realizing we lost. There is a kind of talk that only happens in low light. You have probably noticed it yourself, even now. The conversations that come at midnight, in a car in the dark, on a porch when the last lamp is off. People say things in the dark they would never say across a bright kitchen table at noon. The dark loosens something. It takes away the face or softens it, and once the face is gone, the guard goes with it, and out comes the true thing, the hard thing, the thing that needed the cover of dusk to be spoken at all. The evening outside was built out of that light. That was its hidden work, not the sitting, the saying. Think about where the hard conversations of a family used to happen, not scheduled, not sat down for. They happened sideways in the dark when a father and a son were both looking at the same fading sky instead of at each other, and it was easier that way. A boy could ask the question he had been carrying for a month. A tired parent could finally say the thing that had been too heavy to say indoors. Grief came out in that hour. Worry came out. The news that someone was sick, or leaving, or in trouble, tended to arrive on the step after dark, because the daylight was too exposed to carry it. And the old stories came out. This is the part that aches the most. The evening outside was where an entire family's memory got handed down, where a grandmother with nothing else to do and nowhere to look would start talking about the old country or the hard year or the person who died before you were born, not as a lecture, as a thing that surfaced in the quiet because the quiet made room for it. Those stories were the roots of a family, and they were passed almost entirely in that unhurried dark hour, from the ones who remembered to the ones who would carry it next. Now ask yourself a question honestly. Where does that talk happen now? When, in a normal week, is your family in the same place, with nothing to do, no screen on, no plan, just the dark and each other and enough time for the real thing to finally rise? For most of us, the honest answer is almost never. We took away the container the deep talk used to live in, and we did not build another one, and so the deep talk mostly just stopped. We have more ways to communicate than any people who have ever lived, and we say less of what actually matters to the people right beside us than almost any generation before us. That is not a coincidence. Talk needs a certain kind of room to grow in. It needs boredom. It needs low light. It needs a stretch of time with no exit and nothing better flashing at the edge of your eye. The screen removed every one of those conditions. It gave us something to look at, and in doing so it quietly took away the reason to turn toward each other and speak. There was a man I heard about years ago who said the only real conversation he ever had with his father in his whole life happened on the back step, one summer night when he was 17, and it lasted maybe 20 minutes, and he remembered every word of it for the rest of his life. 20 minutes in the dark in 50 years of living in the same house. And when I heard that, I did not think how sad. I thought, at least he got the 20 minutes. At least there was still a step to sit on, and an hour with nothing in it, and a dark deep enough for his father to finally speak. A boy today might not even get that. But the family was not the only thing that lived in that hour. There was another kind of talk happening at the edge of the yard, over the fence, in the last of the light. And when the evenings moved indoors, that one did not just weaken. It vanished almost completely, and we are still paying for it. But not everyone sat still in that hour. For many, the evening outside was when the last work of the day got done, and it was the gentlest work there was. Picture it, the sun low, the heat finally broken, and someone moving slowly down a row of beans with a watering can. Not rushing. There is no rush left in the day. Just water and the smell of it hitting warm, dry soil, that particular smell that rises up the second the water lands, one of the oldest and most satisfying smells a human being can know. A few weeds pulled, a tomato turned in the hand to check its color, a dead flower pinched off, small things. The kind of work that asks nothing of the mind and gives everything to the body. This was the garden's quiet hour, and it was different from the mornings. The morning garden is about beginning, about hope, about what might grow. The evening garden is about tending, about closing, about walking the rows one last time to see how the day treated the things you planted. It is the garden you visit not to make it do anything, but simply to be with it, the way you might sit with someone you love at the end of a long day and not need to say a word. And the body knew what to do out there without being told. The bending, the reaching, the slow, steady movement that is not exercise and not rest but something better than either, the kind of gentle motion the human body was actually shaped for. Hands in the soil. And we now know, though they did not, that the soil itself was doing something. That there are things living in healthy earth that lift the mood the moment they touch the skin, a natural steadiness that comes up through the fingers. Those people were being quietly medicated by their own gardens every evening, and none of them had any idea. They only knew they slept well. Here is a number that should stop you. People who spend time with their hands in soil in the evening tend to fall asleep faster and sleep more deeply than people who spend that same hour in front of a screen. Same hour, same tiredness, completely different night. One winds the body down into the dark the way it is meant to go. The other floods the eyes with a light that tells the brain it is still midday, and then we lie awake and wonder why. And there was a rhythm to it across the seasons that anchored a whole life. In spring, the evening garden was frantic with promise, so much to plant before the light failed. By high summer, it was abundance, more than you could use, giving things over the fence to neighbors. In autumn, it was the slow closing down, the last harvest, the beds put to sleep. And in the dark of winter, there was no evening garden at all, and you felt its absence, and you waited. That cycle, felt in the body every single evening, was one of the last ways ordinary people stayed connected to the turning of the year. Without it, one evening became exactly like the next, and the seasons became just weather that happened to the outside of a lit window. Ask yourself when you last watched the light fail while your hands were busy in the earth. For most people now, the honest answer is that it has been years, or that it has never happened at all. We ended the evening garden the same way we ended everything else out there, not with a decision but with a slow drift indoors, and we did not notice that we had traded the deepest sleep of our lives for the shallow glow of a screen. But the garden was not a private thing. It had a fence, and on the other side of that fence was another life, and in the evening hour the two of them met. And when the evenings ended, that meeting ended too, and a whole web of connection between neighbors quietly came apart. Here is something you almost never think about. You used to know your neighbors because of the time of day. Not because you were especially friendly, not because anyone organized it. You knew them because you were both outside at the same hour, every evening within speaking distance for years. That is all it takes. Proximity plus time plus repetition. The evening outside supplied all three automatically without anyone having to try. Picture how it worked. You are out in the yard after supper. Next door they are out in theirs. There is a fence between you low enough to lean on, and so you lean on it. And you say something about the weather or the tomatoes or the price of something, and they say something back, and it is nothing. It is the smallest talk there is, and it happens again the next night and the next, and across 1,000 evenings of nothing at all, something real is built. You know when their child is sick. They know when your parent is failing. When something goes truly wrong, there is already a bridge there, worn smooth by 1,000 small crossings, and help moves across it without anyone having to ask. That is what a neighborhood actually was. Not a place, a frequency. A whole street of people who happened to be outside at the same time every evening, close enough to talk, often enough to matter. It was held together entirely by that shared hour in the open air, and almost nobody understood that at the time, because the thing that holds a world together is usually invisible until it is gone. And then the evenings moved indoors and watch what happened to the fence. There was no one to lean on it. You were inside facing your screen. They were inside facing theirs. Two families 30 feet apart, both sitting in the blue light at the exact same moment and no longer aware the other one existed. The bridge was still there, the fence, the nearness, but nobody crossed it anymore, and a bridge that no one crosses slowly stops being a bridge at all. Consider the strangeness of it. We did not move apart. The houses stayed exactly where they were. We are as close to our neighbors in pure distance as people have ever been. And yet, a huge share of people today could not tell you the name of the family on the other side of their wall. We achieved something no previous humans ever managed. We became strangers to the people we live closest to. And we did it not by moving away, but by staying in. There is a word for what we lost, and researchers who study why some communities are healthier than others use it constantly. They call it social connection, and they have found that it predicts how long you live more powerfully than almost anything else, more than diet, close to smoking. Not deep friendship, just the ordinary, low-grade, everyday sense of being known and greeted and part of a place. The exact thing the evening over the fence produced for free, every night, for anyone who simply went outside. And here is the loop I asked you to hold from the very beginning, starting to close. Remember the one person on every street who kept going out to sit, even after the television arrived. The old neighbor in the chair. For a long time, they were the only bridge left on the whole street. They were the one who still leaned on the fence, still knew everyone's name, still noticed when a light stayed off too long in a house where someone lived alone. They were holding the neighborhood together almost single-handed, in an hour when everyone else had gone in. We will come back to them once more, because what happened to those people tells you everything about what the evening was really worth. But first, the ones who were most shaped by that hour and never got to choose it. The children, out in the last light, growing up under an open sky, in a way almost no child grows up now. The children were always the last ones in. While the adults settled into their chairs, the children took the yard and the field and the street, and the whole soft edge of the day belonged to them. This was not scheduled play. No one drove them anywhere. No one watched a clock. They simply spilled out into the dusk after supper and stayed until a voice called them home through the dark. And that voice, that particular sound of a name being called across yards at nightfall, was the true clock of childhood. Think about what that hour gave a child. Freedom first, real freedom, the kind that has almost completely vanished. A child in that last hour of light was out of sight of adults, running a small world of their own making, settling their own arguments, inventing their own games out of nothing but sticks and dirt and each other. No one hovering, no one narrating. Just a pack of children and a fading sky, and an hour that felt to them like it went on forever, because the best hours of childhood always seem to bend time. And there was the dark itself, arriving slowly and learning not to fear it. A child who has run through 100 dusks knows the dark the way you know an old friend, the way the yard changes when the light goes, the way sound travels further, the way the first star feels like a personal event. That child grows up with the night in their body, unafraid of it, at home in it. Compare that to a child raised entirely indoors under a ceiling light, for whom the dark outside is a thing seen only through glass, an unknown, a place of vague threat. We did not just take the evening from children. We taught them, without meaning to be afraid of the night. Here is a small scene I cannot let go of. A child lying flat on their back in cooling grass, alone, at the exact moment the sky goes from blue to black, watching the stars come out one at a time. Not on a screen, not in a photo. The real sky, the real vastness, pressing down on a small body that suddenly understands, without any words, how large the world is and how small and safe and held they are inside it. That experience, so ordinary once that every child had it 100 times, is now so rare that many children will reach adulthood having never had it once. And something forms in a person during that moment that I am not sure forms any other way. You may have had that moment yourself long ago. Notice that you remember it. Notice that out of 10,000 hours of childhood, the ones that survive most vividly are often these, the outside ones, the dusk ones, the ones with sky in them. There is a reason those are the memories that last. The evening outdoors was laying down the deepest tracks a young mind can lay, and it was doing it every single night for free, while everyone thought the children were just playing. And they were learning each other. All that unsupervised time in the last light was where a child learned how to be with other children, how to lose and not fall apart, how to lead and how to follow, how to read a face going dim in the dusk. The whole difficult art of being a person among people was practiced out there, in the grass, in the dark, without a single adult managing it. We moved that indoors too, onto screens, where a child can now spend a whole childhood interacting constantly and learning almost none of it. So a generation grew up under an open sky, unafraid of the dark, deeply known by the street, carrying stars in their memory. And the generations after them grew up in the blue light, and we are only beginning to understand the difference. But the difference was never only in the mind. Something was happening in the body too, in all those bodies, out there in the evening air, something we can finally measure, and it explains why the people who kept the old evening tended to outlast the ones who let it go. Now here is the part they never knew, the part we can finally see, and it changes how you understand every evening on that porch. That whole hour outside, the sitting, the slow garden work, the fading light, was quietly tuning the body in ways that reach all the way down to how long a person lives. None of them felt it happening. They only knew that they slept and rose and felt steady. But underneath the calm, an entire machinery was being set right every evening, the same machinery that in most of us now runs broken. Start with the light itself. The human body reads the color of the light to know what time it is. Bright blue light means day, means be alert. Warm, dim light, the gold and red of a sinking sun, means night is coming, means begin to wind down, means release the chemistry of sleep. For all of human history, the evening delivered exactly that signal, on schedule, every single night, and the body wound down on cue. Then we replace the sunset with a screen that pours bright blue light straight into the eyes for hours after dark. And the body, faithfully doing its job, concludes that it is still midday and holds back sleep. And we lie awake, and we call it insomnia as if it were a disorder, when it is simply a body being told the wrong time by a light we invented. The people on the porch were bathed in the correct signal every night. The setting sun told the truth to their bodies. And so they got the one thing so many of us cannot buy back at any price. Deep, early, natural sleep. And deep sleep is not a luxury. It is when the body repairs itself, clears the mind, resets the whole system. Miss enough of it, year after year, and it shows up eventually as almost everything we fear. The evening outside was protecting all of that silently, and we traded it for a brighter room. Then there is the stress the body carries. A day any day then or now loads the system with tension, a low hum of alertness that is fine in small doses and poison when it never switches off. The evening outside was the great switch. The open sky, the slow light, the idle hands, the murmur of familiar voices, all of it told the nervous system the same thing. The threat is over. You are safe. You can stand down. And the body did every night, dropping out of its daytime guard into something soft and restorative. The screen does not do this. The screen keeps the system pinging, alert, engaged, right up until the moment we close our eyes, so that we carry the whole day's tension into the dark with us and never fully set it down. And there is the simple matter of the air and the movement, which we forget to count. An evening outside meant fresh moving air in the lungs instead of the same warm room breathed over and over. It meant the body upright and shifting, walking a row, bending to a plant, carrying a chair, rather than folded into one shape for hours. None of it was exercise. No one out there thought of it as anything at all. But the body counts every one of those small movements, the standing and the reaching and the slow walk to the far fence and back. And over a lifetime, they add up to the difference between a body that stays loose and willing and one that stiffens early into the chair it never leaves. The evening kept people gently moving at the exact hour. We now sit most completely still. Here is a fact that ties the whole thing together. In the places on Earth where people most reliably live past 100, researchers keep finding the same unglamorous habits, and near the top of the list every time is this. They spend the end of the day outdoors, moving gently among people they have known their whole lives in the falling light. They never called it a longevity practice. To them, it was just the evening. But it was doing, all along, exactly what the porch was doing, exactly what the fading garden was doing. It was the ordinary evening outside, the very thing we gave away, quietly buying its keepers years of life they never knew they were earning. So understand what the trade really was. It was never just an hour of company for an hour of screen. It was deep sleep for shallow sleep, low stress for constant stress, a body wound down correctly for a body wound up wrong, added years on one side and a slow subtraction on the other, hidden inside a change so pleasant that no one ever felt the cost. And now, at last, we can come back to the person I asked you to remember from the very start, the one who never made the trade, the one who kept their chair outside. You know them even now. There was one on almost every street. Long after the television had pulled everyone else indoors, there was one person who still went out every evening and sat in the same spot, facing the same fading sky, the way people always had. Usually older, often alone. And to everyone else it looked like stubbornness or habit or an old person who had simply never adjusted to the new way of things. The family would call through the screen door, "Come in, your show is on," and the answer would come back in a minute, and the minute would stretch into the whole soft length of the dusk. People felt a little sorry for them, out there by themselves while everyone else was warm inside. That was how it looked, but watch closely because it was almost exactly backward. That person in their chair was getting the correct light in their eyes every evening, and so they slept the deep old sleep while the rest of the house lay awake in the glow. They were moving, a little out among the plants, while the others sat still for hours. They were the one who still leaned on the fence, so they stayed known to the whole street, greeted, checked on, held inside the web of the neighborhood long after everyone else had slipped out of it. They kept the stories, because they still had the hour in which stories get told, and the children who wanted the old tales knew to find them out there in the last light. They carried, without any idea they were carrying it, nearly every single thing we have spent this whole time naming as lost. They just never put it down. And here is what people noticed without ever connecting it to the chair. Those were so often the ones who stayed sharp the longest, who kept their minds clear into great age while others faded, who outlived, sometimes by many years, the very people who had once felt sorry for them. The neighbors would shake their heads and call it good genes or good luck or a mystery. It was not a mystery, it was an hour. The same hour, kept faithfully, every evening, for a lifetime, doing its quiet work on a body and a mind long after the rest of the world had traded that hour away. Think of what it must have been for them near the end to sit in that chair, to have watched the whole street go blue in the windows, one house at a time over the years, to be the last keeper of a thing that had once belonged to everyone. There is a loneliness in that, yes, but there is something else too, something we do not have a good word for. The steadiness of a person who never let go of the ground the rest of us stopped standing on. They were not behind the times. They were holding a door open, in case anyone ever wanted to come back out. And that is the quiet invitation still sitting in every one of those empty chairs in the grass. Not a lecture, not a warning, just an open door and a familiar spot facing west, where the light still leans gold across the yard every single evening, exactly as it always did, waiting for someone to notice that it never actually went anywhere. We left. The evening stayed. So the only question left is whether we will ever walk back out through that door. And it is a smaller step than you think, which is the last thing I want to leave you with. Go back to that chair in the grass, the one from the very beginning, the one nobody remembers carrying out. Gray now, soft with dew, facing west toward the place where the light goes down. It is not a relic. That is the thing I most want you to see. It is not a sad object from a vanished world. It is a chair in the grass, and the evening it was made for arrives tonight, and tomorrow night, and every night for the rest of your life, whether or not anyone is sitting in it. The sun will still lean gold across the yard around the hour supper ends. The light will still turn that nameless blue for its 20 minutes. The first star will still come. The whole enormous free ceremony we walked away from is still running, every evening in every yard, exactly as it always did. We are the only part that stopped showing up. And nothing is asking you to give up the screen or the warmth or the bright, interesting world we traded it all for. The evening outside was never greedy. It only ever wanted an hour, less than that. 20 minutes on a step with the light going down and the phone left inside is enough to feel the whole thing come flooding back. The settling, the deep quiet, the sense of a day actually ending instead of just being switched off. The body remembers immediately. It never forgot. It has been waiting the whole time for you to sit back down. Think of everything we said was lost. The deep talk that only comes in low light. The neighbors who knew your name, the children under the open sky. The deep sleep, the dropped tension, the quiet years added to a life. None of it was destroyed. None of it was taken by force. It was only set down gently, one comfortable evening at a time, and a thing that is only set down can always be picked back up. That is the mercy hidden inside the whole sad story. We did not break it. We just stopped doing it. And the difference between those two is the difference between something gone forever and something waiting patiently in the yard. So tonight, when supper ends and the house grows warm and the blue light calls the way it always calls, you might do the oldest thing there is. You might push back your chair and not turn on the screen and drift instead toward the door and step out into the last of the light and sit down in the grass and do absolutely nothing and let the evening have you for a little while, the way it had everyone who came before you, all the way back. The people who lived the longest were never doing anything special